now in session. Delegates, settle down. Delegates, settle down. We are honored to have 10 candidates who will be candidates for President of the United States. No. Accept our invitation to join us here today. And what I love about this forum is it's not just us hearing from them. It's that they came to listen to you. That is what's historic. Before we bring out our guests, I do want to recognize a very special friend of the NEA and a very special guest, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. We're sitting in her congressional seat. Where are you, Congresswoman? And Representative Jackson Lee is our good friend. We will now begin our first, NEA's first Strong Public Schools Presidential Forum.
1957, 43 educators answered a national call to unite as one voice committed to advancing public education. 162 years later, the National Education Association now represents more than 3 million educators. Our members serve students at every level of education in more than 14,000 communities across the country. We're the nation's largest labor union. When we talk, our communities listen. And when we vote, our communities change. In the 2016 general election, 1 in every 39 votes cast was made by an NEA member or family member. Now that's real power. Understanding the strength of our voice, 89% of registered NEA members voted in the last presidential election. With the stakes as high as ever, we must continue to make our voices heard. We must make sure students, regardless of where they live or how much their families make, have the support, tools, and time to learn. And that educators who provide for them have the tools and funding to do the job right. Use your voice. Do your part. Learn how you can get involved at strongpublicschools.org. You certainly know who I am, but there's some very special guests backstage listening, and we are live streaming this for the first time all across the country, so I will take a minute to introduce myself. I am Lily Eskelson Garcia, a 6th grade teacher from Utah. And coincidentally, president of this nation's largest labor union, the National Education Association. We represent over 3 million compassionate, caring, professional educators. I think we got 3 million in this room right now. And what we have to say about the needs of public school students and their families and their communities should be important to elected officials who will make the decisions that we all have to live with, that our students have to live with. And that's why we've come here together on this very special Red for Ed Day. Red for Ed. It's all about the voice of educators and our responsibility to protect our students and the integrity of our professions. Red for Ed is a movement that has spread across our great nation. And we are marching this movement straight towards election 2024.
2020, where we intend to stand up and be part of the democratic process that will choose the next president of the United States of America. We're doing something very different. We talked to a lot of candidates. This time, the questions that you're going to hear will come directly from our NEA members. These are educators who have submitted their questions through our website on either video or typing it in and asking what they want to hear on strongpublicschools.org. Anyone can go up there and take a look during today's forum. Each candidate, and this is important because we're teachers, we know when to tell someone to put their pencils down, right? We are giving each of these candidates 10 minutes. Let me tell you how it's going to go. Each candidate will have 1 minute of an opening remark, anything they want to say. Then they will answer 3 questions. One will be on video, the other 2 will be written. We've taken them right off the website. The candidates will have no more than 3 minutes to answer each question. You can take a look in the corner of the screen. We're going to put it up there, I think. When they start talking, you'll see it counting down. All right? Nobody's going to get more time. But let me tell you, when it gets to 0 and it counts down, I don't want to cut off mics or give them a gong or a buzz or, scold them. That would be fun. But no. What we want to do, because we're polite, is when it says 0, we will start applauding politely. Let me try it. Yes, okay, yes. And that is their very polite way of us saying nobody gets more time than someone else. Maybe some of the candidate forums could learn how to be polite, and we're going to show them how. For us, election 2020 begins right here, right now. Hermanos y hermanas, may I introduce to you our first candidate who would like to be the next president of the United States.
Please welcome Bernie Sanders.
I see this big clock right here.
Okay.
It's very intimidating.
All right, so Senator Sanders, 1 minute.
Right, I see that, believe me. All right. All right. I am wearing this red tie proudly today because I am here to congratulate the NEA and teachers all over this country who have had the courage to march on their state capital to demand we change national priorities in this country, that instead of giving tax breaks to billionaires and subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, that we invest in the children of this country and in education. And I want to tell you that the courage of the teachers is reverberating all over this country. Working people from coast to coast are now demanding an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. Teachers, thank you very much.
All right. He's showing me the numbers. He's going, did you see that?
Made it by 3 seconds.
I did that, right. All right. So Senator Sanders is going for the extra credit. All right, so there we go. And we have teachers and support professionals, higher education, preschool, and public service folks in here. And so we are very interested in the question that came online. So let me read to you what Tom, a retired teacher from Nevada, asks, how do you plan to protect and defend Social Security and Medicare?
Okay. A number of years ago, there was an attempt by Republicans and some Democrats to cut Social Security. And at a time when we have 20% of our senior citizens trying to get by on less than $14,000 a year, when seniors are cutting their prescription drug pills in half, cutting Social Security did not seem like a particularly good idea to me. So what we did is we put together a caucus that I chaired called the Defending Social Security Caucus. And we said that we will not allow Social Security retirement age to be raised. We will not support a so-called chain CPI. That what we are about is not cutting Social Security, it is expanding Social Security benefits. And the legislation that I proposed was called scrapping the cap. Right now in America, if you make about $130,000 a year, you pay the same amount into Social Security as somebody who makes $30,000 a year. If you're a multimillionaire, you're only paying Social Security taxes on the first $130,000. That seems to me to be absurd. So what our legislation does is lift that cap on people who make $250,000 or more, the top 1%. We bring in substantial sums of revenue, which does two things. It expands Social Security benefits for lower-income seniors, and second of all, it extends the life of Social Security by about 50 years. Now, all of you know that for the last 45 years, there has been a war against the working class of this country. And at the same time, Republicans want to give tax breaks to billionaires. They are talking about cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. We are going to stand up to them. And our view is you're not going to cut Social Security, you're going to extend the life of it so that it will be strong and viable for our kids and our grandchildren. You're not going to cut Medicare because we are going to fight for a Medicare for all single-payer program.
Thank you. On strongpublicschools.org, our website, we invite folks to ask questions, and they can ask them by video. Our first member video question comes from Marielle E. in Hawaii.
My question for presidential candidates is, how are you going to increase salaries to make teaching more attractive so that we will have less teacher shortage nationwide? Thank you so much. Mahalo.
Well, let me thank Mary for that very important question. And the truth is, the answer goes beyond teacher salaries, which I'll talk about in a moment. The answer has everything to do with changing national priorities. The answer has everything to do with changing the culture of America so that we recognize that there is nothing more important than education in America. And if we appreciate that education and learning is all about what human life has to do with, all of us should be learning from the day we're born to the day we die. And of course, in America, the wealthiest country, in the history of the world, it must go without saying, we are going to have the best public schools in the entire world. And that means that it goes without saying that we are going to have teachers who receive the respect and the remuneration that they deserve for doing some of the most important work in America. And it means that when we talk about teachers in the year 2019, the proposal that I have brought forth, comprehensive proposal on education, says that every teacher in America should earn at least $60,000 a year. It also, another proposal that we have brought forth, which impacts 45 million Americans, including many teachers, is that it is absurd to have so many of our people struggling with oppressive levels of student debt. We have got to cancel student debt in America. Now, I've been criticized for this proposal. I'm criticized for every proposal, because I try to stand up for working families in this country and not the billionaire class. But on this proposal, if we could bail out the crooks on Wall Street to the tune of trillions of dollars, we surely can cancel student debt in America.
This question comes from Linda, a teacher in Alabama. How will you strengthen our country's public schools and educate our citizens about why privatization and charter schools are not good for our children?
Well, for a full answer to that question, please go to my website. And if you do, this is what you will find. Our proposal, it's called the Thurgood Marshall Educational Plan. We end federal funding completely for for-profit charter schools. Taxpayer money should be going to educate our kids, not to make Wall Street investors even richer than they are. And our proposal puts a moratorium on all new charter schools until we have a full understanding of their impact on public education. And our proposal not only triples funding for Title I, our proposal not only moves aggressively to make smaller the classroom sizes that you have got to teach, our legislation in another area raises the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, so everybody in a school is paid at least a living wage. Our proposal moves aggressively to end the increased segregation that we're seeing in schools all over this country. Our proposal understands that real education doesn't just end at the end of the school day. We need to significantly increase funding for after-school programs. We need to make sure that in our country, when kids leave school at the end of the school year, they retain what they have learned into the fall, which is why we need strong summer programs of education and recreation for the kids. And our proposal also understands that it's not just education. It's we have got to end the disgrace of having the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth.
Senator, it's been an honor having you today. Thank you so much.
Okay, can I say one more word? One more word.
No, sorry.
Please welcome Julián Castro.
Julián Castro.
Hey, y'all. Where's Texas? Texas.
Bienvenidos.
Good to see you. I was asking where's
Bienvenidos
Texas.
a nuestra
Gracias.
casa.
¿Dónde está Texas? There they are.
Okay, you know the rules. All right, so we're going to give you 1 minute to tell us anything you want us to know about you. And when the countdown gets to 0, we're going to politely clap for you.
Okay,
For
there
that
you go.
means, yes.
If you don't mind, I'm going to stand up.
Anything you're comfortable with.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Thank you, Lily, for having us. And bienvenidos a Texas y buenas tardes. I'm Julián Castro. I want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to be with you here today and to say how much I appreciate all of the educators who are here who help make the dreams of so many young Americans come true. I come to you here today with a vision for the future of our country, that in the 21st century, that America be the smartest, the healthiest, the fairest, and the most prosperous nation on earth. I come here as the proud product of the public schools of San Antonio. I come here as the son of a father who was a public school educator for 31 years and the husband of a wife who's been a public school educator for 15. If the United States is going to be the smartest nation in the 21st century, we need you. Thank you for having me.
And we have asked people to send in questions written and on video. We'd like you to hear one of our video questions. This comes from Rosie in Arkansas.
It's an honor to teach at this historic high school, where 9 courageous students stepped forward to take on racial segregation in our schools following the Brown versus Board decision. Unfortunately, more than 60 years later, we still haven't achieved equality in our schools. As president, what will you do to finally live up to the promise and commitment of the Brown versus Board decision?
Yeah.
3 minutes.
Thank you very much to Rosie, if she's here in the audience. So I'm one of those students who grew up in an intensely segregated public school district. My brother Joaquin and I have a twin brother. He says the way to tell us apart is that I'm a minute uglier than he is. But I'm a minute older. He's in Congress. We grew up in the San Antonio Independent and Edgewood Independent school districts of San Antonio that were 2 of the poorest public school districts in the state. And so I know from firsthand experience the impact of growing up in segregated school districts. My high school was probably 80 or 85% Mexican American. The challenge is that today we're still grappling with so many of the same issues that we were grappling with 30, 40, 50 years ago. And even though our educators do a tremendous job with their students, y'all see every day the impact of that segregation. What are we going to do about it? A few weeks ago, I released what I call my People First Education Plan. And one of the parts of that deals with fairness in education. If we want to make sure that every child can get as great an education as possible, in addition to investing in our educators and treating them with respect, in having them lead when it comes to improving public education, in addition to investing in facilities and expanding opportunity, we also need to do things like tackle housing segregation. When I was Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President Obama, we passed the most groundbreaking rule called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. It was the most groundbreaking rule since the Fair Housing Act to further desegregate our country. I would also invest in more housing opportunity in higher opportunity areas so that we have students' ability to go into school districts that traditionally they couldn't afford to be in. In addition to that, I would invest in tools like voluntary busing so that within school districts, folks are able to go to different schools. And I would make sure that we invest in fair housing enforcement, because too often times when a family of color goes and they look for an apartment or a house in certain neighborhoods, they're still turned down simply because of the color of their skin. We need to do all of those things if we're going to tackle the continuing segregation that too oftentimes limits the ability of our students to achieve their dreams.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have a written question from Timothy, who's a special education teacher from Alaska. He asks, my take-home pay has gone down the last few years due to the rising cost of health insurance. What are you going to do to address this problem?
Thank you very much for the question. I believe that there's no reason in our country that anybody should ever go without health insurance because they don't have the money for it. I grew up with a grandmother who had come to the United States when she was 7 years old from Mexico with her little sister because their parents had died and their closest relatives lived in San Antonio. She grew up on the west side of San Antonio, worked as a maid, a cook, and a babysitter because she never finished even elementary school, raised my mom as a single parent, and then my mom raised my brother and me as a single parent. My grandmother, for as long as I knew her, had type 2 diabetes. And I watched her as her condition got worse and worse. Right before she passed away, she had to have one of her feet amputated, which, as many folks in the audience know, is very common for severe diabetics. But that whole time, she had Medicare. I want to strengthen Medicare for the folks who are on it, and then make sure that Medicare is available to everyone who wants it in this country. Because too often times, I believe that the difference between health care and health insurance is that health insurance is the denial letter that you get telling you the 2 or 3 reasons why you're not going to get covered. Or you are covered, but the out-of-pocket expenses, the costs are still too great. We can change and improve our system. I also believe that we need to fundamentally transform our healthcare system so that we do simple but powerful things. For instance, we need to end the distinction between physical health care and mental health care and fully fund mental health care in our country. And as public school educators, you see the impact that our healthcare system and its shortcomings have on our students each and every day. My education plan calls for investing in a community school-based model that includes wraparound services so that students are able to avail themselves of good resources so they can be healthier. I believe that all of these things go together, that all of these dots are connected. We don't exist, we don't live in silos, and neither should our policy in this country. Thank you.
And one final question, Secretary Castro. It comes from James in Illinois. Illinois, they don't get out much. Okay? All right? Just so it's known. His question is, How do you propose to allow professional educators to participate in the formation of true education reform without the inevitable politics that comes with it?
Yeah. Thank you very much. Let me tell you a very quick story that goes to this question. In between college and law school, I went back to my old high school. I had just turned 22 and I looked like I was 18. I looked like I belonged in the school. I got 3 classes as a permanent substitute teacher at my old high school. One of them had 39 students, one had 38, and one had 37, which I thought was against Texas law, but apparently not. On the 3rd day that I was there, I turned around to write something on the blackboard, and some student from the back of the room put together like 3 or 4 loose leaf pages and chunked it at the back of my head. It hit me in the back of my head, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to turn around and try and figure out who had done it, try and send them to the vice principal's office, or to pretend like it didn't happen and save my dignity. I remember every single day going home that semester and feeling like I had to take a 5-hour nap. Y'all know what I mean? But I also remember both the joy of the moments when I felt like I had really helped a student understand something they didn't understand before, and the frustration when I felt like I wasn't getting through, or that I could see they needed other resources or they needed something else that I wasn't able to give. I came away with a tremendous respect for the fact that teaching takes skill, it takes effort, it takes understanding, and it takes patience. And that teachers who have done it, who have been there, who have been through the ups and downs and the good times and the bad times and have made a difference, have so much to give to inform education policy. Already in this campaign, as we formulated our education plan, we reached out to the NEA and its educators and to teachers across this country. And my pledge is that we'll continue to do that if I'm elected President of the United States, to make sure through commissions, through testimony, through appointments to important boards, that educators have a strong voice as we move toward an education future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor. Thank you. We are now ready for our next candidate.
Please welcome Joe Biden.
So now you know the rules. You know the rules.
Good.
We're going to politely clap when we get down to 0. You will have 1 minute to give an opening statement. And then we have 3 questions from our members. And so you can share with us anything you'd like for 3 minutes. And then if you go over, which I know you won't. I know you won't.
It's other debates.
I know you won't. But then we'll just start clapping. I'm sorry, so 1 minute for an opening statement.
If you go over, you get clapped for?
You get clapped.
All right,
Yes,
well,
see,
maybe
we're
I'll go
nice.
over.
We're nice. It's a win-win.
All right, I get a minute?
You get a minute to give an opening statement.
Folks, look, my deceased wife is a teacher. My present wife for 42 years, Jill, is still teaching. And I taught in school. I taught in law school. I was a substitute teacher. And I came away with 3 things from all this experience. Number 1 is teaching is not what you all do, it's who you are. But the thing, no, for real. And you hold, more than any other profession, you hold the future of this country in your hands. No, I'm not exaggerating. It's a fact. Look, folks, all these children are our children. They're all our children. They're the kite strings that lift our national ambitions aloft, and they're in your hands. And we don't treat you with enough respect or dignity. We don't pay you enough. And I promise you, if I am your president, it will change on day 1.
Mr. Vice President, up on a website, we've let people write their questions and video their questions. We have a video question for you from Rudy, one of our education support professionals in Pennsylvania.
Hey, Pennsylvania.
There's a vast difference in the amount of economic support that goes into our students of color, especially in economically deprived areas, and I would like to know how they would help us out there.
And so how would you be more inclusive of students of color in economically deprived areas?
Number one, folks, every one of our students has an incredible potential, but most don't have the opportunity. First thing I would do, I would double the funding for Title I. Triple it, from $15 to $45 billion a year. And they'd have to do three things, the district that got it. One, they have to focus on equalizing teachers' pay. Number two, you'd have to make sure that you're in a situation where you bring into the school system all the people and aid you need. For example, school psychologists, sociologists, people who, in fact, you need in your toolkit to help you, because we ask too much of you right now. Thirdly, I would see to it that we rebuild the infrastructure of our schools. The infrastructure of our schools are horrible. I would devote of the infrastructure money $100 billion to redo the schools, and particularly in those areas that are economically deprived. Thirdly, I would make sure that we understand that the moment a child is born, no matter what their color, their race, or their background, they all have an equal shot. And that's why we would start with universal pre-K, and before that, going into... No, look. What I don't get is why we're even arguing about this anymore. All the data is in. There's overwhelming evidence that it enhances every single community if we do it. And the other thing I would do in those schools that are challenged in tough neighborhoods, I would make a significant investment of another $100 billion in those school districts across the country in order for teachers in there to be able to get paid for mentoring, be able to get paid for teaching other teachers, bringing them along. Because, folks, we have to have you in the schools teaching. You shouldn't be doing 3 jobs or 2 jobs. And the last, no, really. Look, like I said, I've been married to a school teacher. Oh, anyway, by the way, the reason I became a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, I was tired of the mail coming Dr. and Joe Biden. But it hadn't changed. But anyway, look, the other thing is, folks, we're in a position where we have the opportunity to fundamentally change. In those schools we're talking about, I would see to it that there also are challenging programs, AP programs that allow every school district to challenge their students. I'd have after-school programs, which are included in my initiative. I would make sure that we're in a position that we let children in a position to be able to go beyond high school. Lastly, 12 years is not enough anymore, folks, for anybody to live in the middle class. And so what I call for is anyone seeking a certificate, a degree, whatever the deal is, including a community college, it is absolutely free. And by the way, we can easily afford it. We just eliminated one of the $1.6 trillion in tax cuts. It's called stepped-up basis. That means for folks who have a lot of money, if they're about to cash in a capital gains, they get hit by a truck, their kid gets left the money. Guess what? Eliminate it. It's only $17 billion that pays for all of this. All right.
See, I told you it's a win-win. It's a win-win. We have a question that someone typed in, June, who's an art teacher in Massachusetts, would like to know, what role do you think educators should play in terms of crafting education policy, local, state, and national, and why?
You should craft the policy. It's like saying, we can run an engineering operation. Let's go get a plumber. Let's go get a lawyer. Folks, you're the ones that know it. First thing, as President of the United States, not a joke, first thing I will do is make sure that the Secretary of Education, not Betsy DeVos, it is a teacher. A teacher. Promise. A teacher. Not a joke. Number one. Number two, folks, and so the press doesn't get confused, I promise I'm not going to appoint my wife, okay? Press, I can hear it now. Biden says he'll appoint his wife as Secretary of Education. Bye-bye, she'd be a good one. Second thing is, look, you got to have wraparound, you got to have, as Julio said, you got to have wraparound initiatives here. We have to bring the entire community in. Everything from the Boys and Girls Clubs to the YMCAs to the community development programs. You got to bring everybody in, expose children. You know, I really mean it. What is the greatest thing you can do for a child? Is expose them to what they have the potential to do. Kids, no, I really mean it. Kids don't know if they've never been exposed. I grew up, I never knew a banker or a lawyer or a doctor other than the family physician. But guess what? When I got a little bit older and I got exposed, I thought all of a sudden realized, hey, the stuttering kid from Claymont, I can do that. I can do that. Kids don't know what they can do unless you expose them. And that's the second reason to have this wraparound program. The other thing is, look, with regard to education, you in the classroom should be part of the agenda as to what you are going to teach. You should have a say in, you should have a say in what you need to teach. And I would begin again to put the school districts in a position where they can fund everything from, look at the art programs that have been cut. Look at the art program that have been cut. Look at the after-school program that have been cut. Look at the job training programs that have been cut. How many of you have shop in your school anymore? How many of you have art programs in your school anymore? How many of you are in that situation? So teachers should have the ability to have an input. And I think it should be regularized in terms of the school districts. That's a local decision, but I will put a lot of pressure to make sure teachers are in on deciding what the curricula is, what you're going to teach, because you know better. You know the response to it. And lastly, folks, the thing you have to do the most is we have to elevate teachers as the professionals they are. No. My time's running out. It's all about being treated with dignity. How many times you've been somewhere, you're going through a line and being introduced, and the woman says, by the way, I'm an engineer. So that's great. I'm a teacher. Oh, you teach, huh? Come on. Am I finished?
Mr. Vice President, you do us great honor being here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Wait, my bad. No, don't go anyway. Don't go away, because you have one more question.
Oh,
it's all my fault.
I thought I flunked.
No.
Whoa.
Don't tell anyone what I did. Do not tell anyone what I did, okay? It's just between you and me.
Teachers can keep a secret.
No, we can't. We really can't. I am so sorry. I'm so nervous. It's because I'm nervous. One of these guys is going to be the next president of the United States. You know that, don't you? I'm kind of nervous here. All right. Sean, in Washington State, asks, how would you curb the soaring cost of post-secondary education? How would you promote alternative post-secondary education, such as trades or apprenticeships?
Look, you should be in a position in the high school curricula, and every state has the capacity to do this now, of while in high school, learning to get credits for your community colleges or for trades. That is within our wheelhouse right now. I can't go into more detail. It's 2:40, but anyway. Second thing is, the second thing is, we're in a situation where right now we can afford, and I really mean it, afford, to, in fact, make available the opportunity for people to be able to have paid for them this opportunity. And that's why I really mean it. The idea of being able to go into a trade, that's why Barack and I tried very hard to significantly increase apprenticeship programs around the country. We should be inducing businesses to, in fact, have more apprenticeships. And by the way, I'm a labor guy from belt buckle to shoe sole. Labor are the only guys who do it right now. And so we should be encouraging businesses to engage in what is in their interest. The longer they keep an employee, the greater loyalty they have, and promote from within. But the point is, apprenticeships are available now. You know, there are over 100,000 jobs out there. When I was vice president, and the president asked me to do this study on unemployment, that are going without being filled. High-tech jobs that are basically don't require anything more than a high school degree or a certificate. But they're not being filled. So what we did, we came up with that $8 billion to work with community colleges, to go out to the businesses and say, what are your needs? I won't go into the details, but there's in Detroit, all across the country. What are your needs? And then we said, okay, here's what we'll do. You bring whatever that need is. For example, there was one up in Dow Kokum, up in Michigan. They were making photovoltaic shingles. But they had people who didn't know how to run a photovoltaic machine on the floor. And so what you did, the person who could throw, coal into a blast furnace can learn how to do that too. So they brought the machinery in, and they trained them on that machinery. There was a conveyor belt, averaged $48,000 a job. From there to turns out the corporation didn't do very well at the end. But the point is, there's a lot of these. Up in Rochester, New York, what's going on with the community college up there and dealing, well, you all know that, in dealing with Kodak having collapsed. And it's a big, big deal. But so, folks, we put together, it's an obligation of governance to put together people who, in fact, who have mutual needs. And it can be done not easily, but it can be done well if you do it. And look, folks, the other thing is that we're in a position now where my wife Jill has an expression. Any country that out-educates us will outcompete us. So, folks, we should be investing a great deal more money in pure research, a great deal more money in training. Anyway, thanks.
You're very kind. Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
We are now ready for our next candidate.
Please welcome Elizabeth Warren.
Amazing. This is historic. You are correct. It's also in our blood to tell people when to put their pencils down. So here's how we'll do it. 1 minute for an opening statement, and then we have 3 questions for you, unless I forget to ask the next question. And so, yes, but that would never have happened, of course. And everybody can see that timer on the big screen, and when it hits 0, we're going to politely clap for you.
Okay.
So you have 1 minute to make an opening statement to this amazing group.
Good. So first, let me say, hello, NEA, hello, teachers, librarians, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, everybody who takes care of our children every day. My name is Elizabeth Warren, and I've known what I wanted to do since I was in 2nd grade, and I've never wavered from it. I wanted to be a public school teacher. I used to line my dollies up and teach them. I want you all to know I was tough but fair. By the time I graduated from high school, we didn't have money for a college application, much less to send me off to college. But it was the University of Houston, $50 a semester, a commuter college. That was my chance. Hung on and I became a special needs teacher. I have lived my dream. I just want to say one thing.
Right here.
Lily?
No.
Okay.
No.
I understand.
Nice try, though. Nice try. We have allowed thousands and thousands of people have gone up to our strongpublicschools.org website.
Yes.
They've uploaded videos of themselves asking all of you questions.
Good.
You're going to hear one of them now. It's from Sarah, an education support professional in Kentucky.
Okay.
What can you do for the United States to ensure that all children are entitled to a fully funded public education, a quality education for all?
I got a plan for that. Because I believe that if you want to get something done, you really do need a plan for that. So let me just give you some pieces of it. It starts with a wealth tax. That's a 2-cent tax on the top 0.1% of the great fortunes in this country. People who have more than $50 million in wealth, we say your first $50 million, that's cool, but your 50 millionth and first dollar, pitch in 2 cents, and 2 cents for every dollar after that. Here's what we can do with 2 cents. We can provide universal child care for every baby in this country aged 0 to 5. Universal pre-K for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in this country. Raise the wages of every preschool teacher and every child care worker to the professional levels they deserve. Invest in our infrastructure so we have good, clean schools, state-of-the-art, for all of our kids. Universal, tuition-free technical school, community college, and four-year college for everybody who wants to get an education. And there's more. In that same 2 cents, we can make all of these investments, plus we can cancel student loan debt for 95% of the people who have student loan debt. For me, this is about our values. This is about what we respect as a country. Are we a country that just wants to keep working better and better and better for a thinner and thinner slice at the top? A country that says that top 0.1%, 75,000 families, they got to keep it all. Or a country that says, you make it big, good for you, that's great, we celebrate it. But pitch in 2 cents so every one of our kids has a chance to make it big. There is nothing in this country more important than the education of our children. And I'll tell you this about public school teachers. We recognize the worth of every human being. We invest in the future, and we never give up.
Senator, a couple of people wrote in their questions.
Yes.
They were shy. They didn't want to do a video.
Okay.
Judy is a retired teacher from Washington.
Hi, Judy.
And she would like to know,
There she is.
what would you as president do to put an end to high-stakes testing so that our students and teachers have a fulfilling and dynamic educational experience?
So let me start with a commitment that I have already made publicly, in fact, long before I got to this stage today. I will name someone to be Secretary of Education who has been a public school teacher. Because here's how I see it. I want someone in Washington who every time they think about standards and who's meeting what and are writing all the regulations is someone who's actually seen a child light up, is someone who's actually seen someone engage and suddenly lift their head, knowing something they hadn't known before. Someone who's seen a door open. That's who I want for Secretary of Education. Betsy DeVos need not apply. And it is, as I said, it's about our values. You know, I was a special needs teacher. Special needs teachers understand this notion that it's all about testing, that it's all about what somebody far off in the state capitol or far off in the national capitol says, here's what constitutes success, and worse yet, here's what constitutes failure. No, that's not what education is about. Education is what goes on in the classroom, what a teacher has set as the goal, and when a kid gets there, it is a teacher who knows it. We do not need high stakes testing. I think this goes to the fundamental question of respect for our teachers. Too many folks seem to have gotten the idea that teaching is kind of like, you know, working on an assembly line, and we'll just test your widgets to see if they're coming out all right. And if they are, you must be a good teacher. And if they don't meet the standards set somewhere else, you must not be. No, that is not what teaching is all about. Teaching is about bringing out the best in our children. It's about opening doors for our children. It's about listening to our children. It's about responding to our children. It's about making the most of every minute we spend with our children. That's not about testing. It's about the educational experience, and we need our teachers to be front and center in that.
For
my final question.
Yes. Your last question is from Brooke, an elementary school teacher in Nebraska. When and how will you as a leader make it possible for teachers to earn enough to support themselves on a teaching salary alone?
So, this is at the heart of it. You know, this is partly about money, but again, it's about respect. It's about recognizing every day the worth of what our teachers do. Here's the best place we can start to raise teacher pay and to get more resources into our public schools, and that is strengthen our teachers' unions. Make it easier to join a union. Make it easier to join a union and give those unions more power when they come in to negotiate. Because every teacher understands this. It's what we do individually, one child at a time, but it's also what we do together. That is our strength. You know, we live in an America where democracy is under assault. Time after time after time, decisions made in Washington work great for the rich and the powerful. They get the tax breaks they want. They get the benefits they want. They get the exceptions they want. But for the rest of America, it's just not working. We have a chance to turn that around, and that starts with our teachers. Our teachers showed us last year when they went on the front lines in West Virginia, when they went on the front lines in California and Arizona and Oklahoma, in Georgia and South Carolina, when they went on the front lines, it was a lesson not only in what teachers need to be able to survive, it was a lesson in democracy. We as asked America, state by state, when teachers stood up, what kind of a country do you want to have? Do you want to have a country that just works better and better for a thinner and thinner slice at the top? Or do you want to have a country that works for all our kids? Well, teachers are on the front lines fighting for all of our kids. I have plans to get more money into public education because I believe in public education. But I understand this is about so much more than money. This is about how we build a country going forward. This is about the value of every single one of our children. And this is about teachers who are going to lead that fight. Let's put a teacher in the White House.
Candidate.
Please welcome Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you so much for coming. We're honored to have you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Minnesota delegation. Okay. I don't know if you all know
this. Okay. Now, here are the rules.
Yes.
Here are the rules.
Yeah.
You see this tiny little
I
clock
see
here?
it.
You have 1 minute to tell us whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
And then we've got 3 questions for you.
We know that.
And if we go over, we all love you with a round of applause. So they weren't sure whether to start that or not.
Oh, okay.
Start it now.
To go.
All right, here we go.
Minnesota delegation will tell you this. In Minnesota, when I led the ticket, we elected a teacher as governor of our state. We put in place a union member and leader as education commissioner in the state of Minnesota. I am the daughter of a teacher who left Wisconsin to Minnesota. Why? Because they had strong teachers' unions, right? She taught 2nd grade until she was 70 years old. I believe that education is a right. As I stand before you, a product of education, the granddaughter of an iron ore miner, the daughter of a teacher and a newspaper man, the first woman elected to the state of Minnesota, to the U.S. Senate, and a candidate for President of the United States. That is what education is all about. That is what it's about. Thank you.
That was right on. That was right on. We have several questions, like thousands of them, that came up on our strongpublicschools.org website. And some folks were brave enough to videotape themselves.
Okay,
we have one for you from JC, an aspiring educator from Iowa. And here's her video.
Okay.
Right here.
Many of my peers who are interested in teaching have chosen other careers due to the escalating cost of college, crippling student debt, and a profession where the salaries make it hard to pay off loans, let alone get ahead. What is your plan to attract and retain more educators, in particular educators of color, to this profession?
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. My first plan is to increase teacher pay. That is what we have to do first when we have a situation where only 3% of the federal budget goes to education. That is wrong. And you can pay for it by many ways. One of them is by changing the estate tax, which helps the wealthiest, the way they have an exemption. On top of that, I would encourage our states, and this is a Progress Partnership Plan I put out today, encourage the states to do the same by rewarding them for investing in teachers. The second thing you've got to do, because so many of you are loaded down with student loans, is to make that that program where you get to have your loans paid back, right, from the federal government, to make it actually work. Because it doesn't work at all for our teachers, and it should be working. I think you need respect for our teachers. I know this from watching my daughter, who was in a school for a number of years that was nearly 90% free and reduced lunch. I sent my daughter to public schools. I was in the public schools. And I saw what it was like when you didn't have that kind of respect and those resources for teachers. So that is why I think we have to fully fund our education system. Not partly fund it, but fully fund it. We have to stand up for fully funding IDEA, right? And we have to fully fund our school infrastructure. When I came out with an infrastructure plan, yeah, it's about highways and bridges and trains and everything, but I made sure up front and center was funding our school infrastructure. Why? Because we have crumbling schools all over America. Because we have schools where we literally, last year in Baltimore, didn't even have heat. So funding that school infrastructure has got to be a major part of our plan for America. We are not going to compete with the rest of the world if we don't invest in our schools, if we don't invest in our teachers, and if we don't invest in our kids. That is how you recruit teachers. You recruit teachers by making sure that you have the pay, that you have a good job environment, that you have infrastructure in schools that people want to work in, that you're fully funding your federal programs instead of just putting them on campaign brochures and then letting them go. And you support schools by supporting our educators all over the country, and that means good pay.
Thank you so much. Senator, this question is from Mary in Arizona. She wrote in, and she said, how would you work across the aisle to ensure dreamers are given their opportunity to attend an institution of higher learning, pay in-state tuition, and given a pathway to citizenship?
Exactly. This is one of the saddest things right now is what's happening with our dreamers. Millions of kids came to this country through no fault of their own. You know these kids. They are in your schools. Nearly every school in America has one of these kids. So what I think that we need to do is put them on a path to citizenship, to make them secure in this country. We tried just recently when the Trump administration, by the way, one of the first things I do when I came in is make sure we don't have any commissioner like Betsy DeVos ever in this country again. But what the Trump administration did is they've set us backwards when it comes to immigration, and they actually tried to turn the tables and not do anything about the dreamers. Even when we came up with a bipartisan compromise to give them a path to citizenship, they gut punched us. So what I would do in my first 100 days is to make sure that the dreamers are safe and secure in our country. Then I would make sure, in addition to all those other things I talked about with education, that we have a path to citizenship for the people of this country, and that is comprehensive immigration reform. Because I truly believe in my heart that immigrants don't diminish America, they are America. And you are the ones, you are the ones that are educating these kids. You know what's happened as a result of your work right now? We have 70 of our Fortune 500 companies that are headed up by people that originally came from other countries. 25% of our U.S. Nobel laureates were born in other countries. Many of these kids, they start out with nothing. They may not even know the language. And they come to your schools. Their parents don't know English. Who educates them, right? You do. You do, and you have put them on this path where they are such a necessary part of our economy and our world. So I want to thank you for that, and I can vow to you right now, based on my track record, I will make sure that these kids are part of America, that these kids aren't treated like second-class citizens, and that you who educate them are rewarded for that work.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. We have one more question. This one comes from Jason. He's an educator from Illinois, and he would like to know, What would you do as president to remedy the decaying infrastructure in so many of our country's public schools?
Okay, thanks. So what's happening right now is that this president, he claimed on election night, I don't know if any of you remember that night, it was a pretty depressing evening, but one of the things he said, that's putting it mildly, he said that night that he wanted to invest in infrastructure in this country, right? He said it the night he wins the presidency. Well, he didn't really win it because he didn't get the much votes of everyone else. But he says that night, he says that he wants to invest in infrastructure. What has he done, right? No. He called over the leaders from the Democratic Party. Speaker Pelosi calls them over to the White House, claims he wants to do something. They come back and he blows up the whole meeting. He blows up everything. There's been no investment, any major change in investment in infrastructure. That is why when I put this plan out, that was foremost on my mind, because I have seen these schools. I saw the schools, some of the schools my daughter was in. I have seen the schools across this country. I was in one recently in Nevada and saw when they have air conditioning that hardly works when it's getting up over 100 degrees. I've seen schools that have piping that's bad. I've seen schools where kids can't even hardly go out and play because there's no place to play. And yet I've seen schools like the public school that my daughter was in for high school, which was, I think, about 60% free and reduced lunch, somewhere around there, or 60% kids of color. They invested in that school. And I saw how those kids felt and how those teachers felt when they went to work every day down those big hallways with modern equipment, with modern computer equipment. I was able to see the difference firsthand. And when you live that, like I have, being a product of the public schools, seeing your kid in the public schools, you can't close your eyes to the need for infrastructure and the need to support our teachers and the need to have this be a major part of our platform going forward. So I just want to end by thanking you for your work. Like I said, I would not be here today without teachers. My mom loved to teach. Her favorite thing she taught was the Monarch Butterfly Unit, where she dressed up all in the tunic and the tights with the antennas and a sign that said "To Mexico or Bust." And she went grocery shopping after, and it was not till she died that I found out why she went shopping. A mom came up with her severely disabled son. She said, "This is my son. He had your mom in 2nd grade. When he graduated, he got a job packing groceries, and every year your mom would come back after she finished that day of releasing the butterfly in that outfit, stand in his line, and give him a big hug." That is teachers. That is where I come from. That is where you come from. Thank you, NEA. Let's get to work and win this election. We can do it.
It's been an honor. Thank you, Senator. Thank you so much. We are ready for our next candidate.
Please welcome Beto O'Rourke.
Bienvenidos.
Gracias. Muchas gracias.
Casa es tu casa. 1 minute, and then we'll ask some questions.
Muy buenas tardes. So grateful to be with so many world-class educators here today in Texas. And to my friends from Texas especially, we are grateful for your public service. One of the neighborhoods that the great Sheila Jackson Lee represents in Congress is Kashmir Gardens, a neighborhood that has been hit by 3 500-year floods in just the last 5 years. Hurricane Harvey in 2017 was the worst of them. We showed up to that neighborhood time after time, and 1 year to the day, we saw 4 of the 5 libraries still shut down. We passed Kashmir Elementary, and I said, this has got to be a tough school. But Keith Downey, the neighborhood president, said, this is the bright spot in the neighborhood. Every child that walks in knows that he or she is in the right place because they get to be with world-class public school educators. I want to make sure that I have their back and show them the respect that they've earned and that they deserve. Thank you all for having us out. Gracias.
And you can stand or sit or whatever. I'm comfortable, so I'm just going to stay right here.
Follow your lead.
Yes, and we have a great website. I'm going to say it 32,000 times because I love it. strongpublicschools.org. We've invited all of our members to put up a video or ask a question on that site. This is a video question. You're going to see it right here from Allison in New York.
All right.
My students face a wide array of problems that are somewhat unique to rural America. They are at the vortex of the opioid crisis. How will you ensure that my students and their community are heard in Washington once you get there?
Wow. Allison, thank you for the amazing question that you just asked, and perhaps picking up on where I left off at Kashmir Gardens Elementary. Those children of parents who are addicted to opioids, who have lived through so much trauma and suffering, which no child should have to experience, when they walk in that classroom, that teacher's going to do everything within her power, within his power, to make sure that that kid is whole, not just providing world-class instruction, but so often out of her own pocket, paying for the supplies for that child, paying for that meal if they're on free and reduced breakfast and lunch, and there's not a warm meal for them to look forward to at the end of the day. That teacher's going to provide that meal. I've met teachers here in Texas who out of their own pocket will ensure when that child shows up day after day in the same pair of jeans, the same t-shirt, the same chones, she buys him a new set of clothes, knowing that his ability to learn is tied to his dignity and to his self-worth. So those teachers who make sure that they're there for those kids who are struggling in households that are riven by addiction and opioid abuse, I want to make sure that we've got their backs. And that means holding the pharmaceutical corporations that have produced this devastation accountable for what they have done. Without justice or accountability, we will continue to have impunity, and the 70,000 drug overdose deaths that we saw last year will continue unabated in this country. And now those parents, they need long-term treatment and recovery care. They are not a problem for the criminal justice system. Let us not put them behind bars. They are an opportunity for the public health system in this country. I want to make sure that we've got their backs as well. And then those teachers, those educators struggling under these conditions, providing that kind of wraparound care for every child entrusted within their care, I want to make sure that they can focus on that job, that child in front of them, and not have to work a second or a third job, as so many do, especially here in Texas. That means the right to organize for every educator in every single state in this country. That means a living wage so that you don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. That means that we forgive 100% of your student loan debt if you're willing to dedicate your life to public service. And it means that we invest in HBCUs and minority-serving institutions to ensure that the teachers and the educators in those classrooms look like the students in front of them. Thank you, Allison, for the question.
Writing in this question is James, a social studies teacher in California. And James wants to know, what have you done to support unions?
James from California, thank you for the question. We've seen the devastation in our communities and in our states when unions are not allowed to organize. I was just in Iowa over the 4th of July and learned from those great educators in Iowa that after 2017, when the state legislature stripped their right to organize, their ability to use the leverage of the value that they provide in public education, no longer able to organize collectively for higher wages, better working conditions, and better delivery of care and instruction to children, those teachers and educators are leaving Iowa. Minnesota is seeing a bumper crop of physics teachers and chemistry teachers and kindergarten teachers paid for by the taxpayers of Iowa. So as president, I want to make sure that we guarantee the right to organize for every educator and public servant in every state in the union, including in Iowa and right here in Texas. I want to make sure that I follow the lead that unions have set to guarantee that you can take time off to spend that with your family without penalty and paid, that childcare is affordable in every single part of this country without regard to your income or your zip code, that we have pre-K universal in the United States of America because we know that's an investment that pays handsomely over the lifetime of the beneficiaries and the children, and that healthcare is not a function of privilege or luck or circumstances, but is a basic human right upon which every single child and woman and man in this country can depend. So we will follow the lead that these unions have set to make sure that instead of investing in corporations and special interests, we're investing in people and communities and neighborhoods. When we do that, this economy in our country will truly work for every single one of us, and every single one of our kids will see a future for themselves, which means that this great democracy, the United States of America, will continue to have a future as the greatest country on the face of the planet.
I'll choke him.
Got you.
I've been choked up since the last inauguration. Wait. Okay, all better, all better. We have a question from Cynthia, a life science teacher from Washington. She asks, what is your stand on charter schools and vouchers? And what are you going to do to make sure that public education funding is strictly used for public education?
Great question, Cynthia. So, Cynthia, Amy and I are the parents of 12-year-old boy Ulysses, his sister Molly, who just turned 11, and Henry, who is 8 years old. And they all go to world-class dual-language public schools in El Paso, Texas, getting an absolutely terrific education. So I want to make clear in the way that we walk the talk that our belief is in public schools and public education. In my administration, I want to dramatically increase the funding for public education. For example, paying the full freight of the federal obligation for IDEA funding, $20 billion a year. Having a permanent fund for public education, $500 billion that will be invested to alleviate and erase the disparity between minority-majority schools and school districts and white-majority schools and school districts in this country. We're going to make sure that we invest in educator training, so national certification, our administration will pay for that for every educator who wants to avail themselves of that. And we will ensure that we expand the master teacher program so that those who invested so much of their lives in service to this country through those children that they've served in those schools can also help to teach and mentor the next generation of educators. And I will tell you this, not only do I, as a Democrat, not only do you understand that not a single dime of our public tax dollars can go to vouchers and private schools in this country. But when we were in small town in Texas, Henrietta, Texas, listening to a Republican school teacher, she told me, Beto, if you let Betsy DeVos take my public tax dollars, turn them into vouchers and send them to a private school, I will hunt you down, I will find you, and I will hold you accountable. Which tells me that Republican, Independent, or Democrat, we all believe in public schools. There is a place for public, nonprofit, charter schools, but private charter schools and voucher programs. Not a single dime in my administration will go to them. We will fully fund public education and public educators and make sure that we have a world-class system of public education in the United States of America. We are going to have your back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, Congressman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
Been
you
an
so
honor.
much. Gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
We are ready for our next candidate.
Please welcome Jay Inslee.
Have a seat. I don't know who they told all the rules, but you get 1 minute to make an opening statement. Tell us what you want. Then we have 3 questions for you, and you get 3 minutes. And see that big old timer there?
My friend.
It's up there on the screen for everyone to see when your time is up. And we're so polite that if you go over your time, we're just going to clap for you.
Thank you so much.
All right? Because we're nice. We're nice.
Thank you.
Governor Inslee.
My name is Jay Inslee. I'm governor of the state of Washington. I am personally the product of educators, and I am publicly the product of the educational community. I am the son of Frank Inslee, a biology teacher and coach at Garfield and South High School, the brother of Frank Inslee and the brother of Bonnie and Phil Yenny of East Wenatchee. And from them I have learned this. They have touched so many thousands of lives. I know what teachers and educators do in our state. And I know this, it is time to have a president where education is a family affair. This is a family affair for me, and that is why I'm proud to tell you this achievement in the state of Washington. I believe we need well-compensated, skilled teachers. I'm proud to tell you that I'm a governor this year who got the biggest teacher pay increase in the United States, 31%. We got to make sure that happens federally. Thank you very much.
Governor, up on our website, strongpublicschools.org, we've invited people to ask questions that they want to hear the answers from presidential candidates, and some of them were brave enough to put it on video. This is a video from Daniel from Georgia who submitted this.
My question is, how do you see schools preparing students for the skills necessary in the 21st century when many of our schools were built before the advent of the internet? How do you ensure that all students have access to high-speed internet and classes to teach applicable skills to prepare them for 21st century careers?
Governor.
Daniel, I appreciate that question, but I'm going to answer it a little differently. The question was how to have access to technology. I want to flip it a little bit, because here's what I fundamentally believe. You can have all the access to technology you can imagine, but if you do not have a skilled, resourced educator to provide the relationship with people, nothing good happens, okay? Now, here's why I say that. And I'm going to get to Daniel's question in a moment, but I want to tell you a little story. When I was running for governor in 2012, I walked out of an SEIU meeting and I met a guy named Pio Decano. He was about a 73-year-old guy, and he asked me, "Was Frank Inslee your father?" I said, "Yes." And Pio told me a story. He said that he was a junior at Garfield High School in Seattle in 1957. He was walking down the hallway, and my father, and he said he was thinking, "I'm going to drop out. I'm done. I'm not coming back to school here. This is not working out for me." And he said my father came up behind him and put his hands on his shoulders, gently turned around, put him up against the lockers, gently, I'm sure, and said, "Pio, I've been watching you. There's something going on in your life. I don't know what it is, but I want to help you because you're a smart kid. you got something on the ball. I think you can be a college student. And this 73-year-old man told me a little light bulb went off. It was the first time somebody told him outside his mother that he had something on the ball. And he went in and worked with my dad. They figured out a way to take care of his mother's health care needs. He went to graduate from Garfield High School and college, became a union organizer. We need skilled teachers in the classroom more than any single thing to see to it that those kind of things happen in the United States. I fundamentally believe that. And that's why I'm committed to compensation. Now, technology, here's how we get technology. We have the federal government reverse the Trump tax cuts. We take $20 billion away from the oil and gas industry. We put it in education by fully funding Title I in the IDEA measure so that you can pay teachers what you should, so you can get access to technology, so you can expand broadband access to rural communities, so we can actually give students a step forward. And when we do this, and I think this is important, we've got to start caring as much about the career aspirations of non-college bound students as those bound for college. We need career-connected Washington. We need apprenticeship programs. We need technology so you can be a machinist just as much as a physicist in this country.
Governor Elizabeth is a Missouri higher education instructor, and she wants to know, how do we keep guns out of schools and make schools safe for children and staff?
We are, across the nation, heartsick that your students have to be under this shadow of fear coming to school. We are heartsick that you have to dedicate yourself to helping your students through this anxiety when you should be helping them with their curriculum. And I do think what we need is a president who has the ability to stand up on these issues of gun safety. I'll start there and then I'll move on. We need someone who will stand up to the NRA, and I'll just tell you a little story. In 1994, I was a freshman congressman from a small town of Sela in a red Republican agricultural district in eastern Washington. And there was a bill that came up that proposed to ban assault weapons. I knew that if I voted to ban assault weapons, I would lose my seat in this rural agricultural district. I voted to ban assault weapons, I lost my seat, and I have never regretted that vote for 1 second. That was the right vote then, is the right vote now. And now, having lost my seat, I'm governor of the state of Washington. We have passed, thank you to the Washington State Education Association for that, thank you very much. And now we have passed 3 major gun safety legislation. We have the NRA on the run in Washington State. It is time to have them on the run in Washington, D.C. And I will be a president to make sure we do that. But we know that is not the only issue. Now, Donald Trump is wrong on this. He says that the solution to this, just give first-grade teachers Glock pistols. I went to the White House last February and told him, you're just wrong. That's an idiotic idea. You need to quit tweeting so much, and you need to listen to educators more on this subject. Because, you know what we need? We need a functioning mental health care system so your students have mental health care in the United States. We need more counselors to help students when they have domestic violence, when they have homelessness, when they're exposed to the problems of growing up. And by the way, when we do this, when I say educator, I mean educator. I include as educators bus drivers, cooks, librarians, custodians, psychologists. We got to make sure we wrap around these services around our kids.
last question for you. This one comes from Marcy. She's a special education teacher in Kansas. Her question is, as it's a well-researched fact that early education is a great investment, how can you finance high-quality, public, early education programs for every child?
In 1989, I was a new legislator in the Washington State Legislature, and we came up with this then radical idea of getting 3- and 4-year-old students having early childhood education so that they could be ready for kindergarten, so that kids could be ready for first grade. At that time, it was radical because there really was not a lot of neurological information about the effectiveness of that. And I voted for a thing called the Children's Initiative to finance that. We did not pass that. But now, a quarter century later, we know the neurological evidence that this is perhaps the single best investment of $1 of taxpayer money in the United States. We understand this now. So now, I'm pleased to tell you, as governor of the state of Washington, we have now not only achieved full-day kindergarten for every student, but we've got 48,000 more students getting early child education. Now the question is, how do you finance that? You finance that the new way. The old way is the Donald Trump way, where you give billions of dollars to the top 1% and you hope that that trickles down like pixie dust on all the working people of the United States. The way we financed it in the state of Washington is by taxing the people who should be taxed, the big banks and the high-tech companies, so that that burden is not put on working people. And now we move forward to make rational decisions, to repeal the Trump tax cuts, to take back $20 billion from the oil and gas industry and put it into early child education. That is how we get this job done. Now, I want to leave the stage with a couple other comments. One is about immigration. In my state, we believe in diversity. When Donald Trump tried to threaten me saying, if I have pro-immigrant policies, he threatened me, said, we'll send refugees to my state. I said, send them. We believe in diversity in the United States of America. I'll close with this comment. You have dedicated your professional lives to the generations who come behind us. And we now know we have a moral obligation to those generations, a moral obligation to defeat the climate crisis. I have dedicated the last 2 decades of my public life to defeating this climate crisis. I have proposed a plan to make sure we put people to work in clean energy. And I am the candidate who is saying this: if I am given this high honor, I will make defeating the climate crisis the #1 priority of the United States. Good luck. Thanks a lot. See you at the victory party. Take care. Thank you. I hope that was okay.
We are ready for our next candidate.
Please welcome Bill Deblasio.
Mr. His Honors, how are you? Welcome.
Thank you, Lily.
Real quick, we're going to give you a minute to give an opening statement, and then we're going to ask you 3 high-stakes standardized tests. The answer is C on all of them. Just tell you in advance.
Just what we were hoping
yes,
for.
and you see the tiny little clock we have here.
Tiny.
They can see it up there. And when it gets down to 0, we're very nice. We're just going to clap for you until you stop. Okay, so please. 1 minute. Welcome to the NEA.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you, everybody. All right, everyone, I'm going to be blunt with you. I am angry about the state of public education in America. I am angry about the fact that you are disrespected on a regular basis in this country, despite doing such important work. I am angry about the privatizers. I am sick and tired of these efforts to privatize a precious thing we need, public education. I know we're not supposed to be saying hate. Our teachers taught us not to. I hate the privatizers, and I want to stop them. I'm sick of a federal government that does not focus or invest in education, and it doesn't have to be that way. And every time in this country we talk about putting money into the things that matter, they say there's not enough money. I say there's plenty of money in this world. There's plenty of money in this country. It's just in the wrong hands. We should be investing in our children, in our educators. That's what would work for this country, and that's what I intend to do as president.
Thank you. And on, yes, you did a good job. And on our on our website, we've invited folks to submit questions from all over the country. This is a video that one of our members uploaded. This is from Stephanie in Ohio. She has this video question.
I would like to ask the presidential candidates what the future in standardized testing is going to look like. I really want it to focus on child-based learning rather than just test scores.
Well, here's the bottom line. I'll tell you what we've done in New York. You know, I have the biggest school system in America. We have, thank you, New York, 1.1 million kids, and what we have been doing every single year is getting away from high-stakes testing because it does not work. This is the bottom line. Multiple measures need to be the future of this country, and that needs to be led by the federal government because we have been doing things the wrong way. Instead of focusing on teaching and learning and supporting our educators with professional development, this country created a system of high-stakes testing that took us in the wrong direction. Look, here's what I say. The federal government should be focused on funding our schools at the local level because our current system is not working. Our current system bakes in the inequalities in this country. We need a federal government that finally takes responsibility for funding education the way it needs to be done in this country. That's what I want to focus on. Get away from high-stakes testing. Get away from charter schools. No federal funding for charter schools. By the way, too many Republicans, but also too many Democrats have been cozy with the charter schools. Let's be blunt about it. We need to hold our own party accountable, too. And no one should ask for your support, or no one should be the Democratic nominee unless they're willing to stand up to Wall Street and the rich people behind the charter school movement once and for all. And if we want to make sure that we get away from high-stakes testing, we need a Secretary of Education who's going to be someone very, very different. I've got a radical idea. I hope you're all ready for it. The next Secretary of Education should be an educator. I have named 2 schools chancellors in New York City, largest school system in the country. And I said when I did it, there's no way in hell I'm naming anyone but a career educator to those roles. And we did it. And it made our schools better. And it brought us closer to our educators. And it created cooperation with the union. That has to happen in Washington, too. If we do it right, the right Secretary of Education moves us away from high-stakes testing, away from charter schools, and through a true federal commitment to traditional public education.
Okay, writing in to that website, Christina, a teacher from Minnesota, asks...
Was that homage? Was that a tribute to Minnesota?
That was Minnesota. I'm bilingual. I can do that. You betcha. If you believe public education is a right and the foundation of our democracy, how do you plan to support it after so many years of neglect?
Public education is a right and is the foundation of our democracy. So I've got 3 ideas I think would change things. 1, I'm going to put forward a plan to make the federal government truly responsible for funding public schools. Remember, in a country where so much of the responsibility falls on localities that cannot afford it. Particularly lower income communities, particularly communities of color, bear the brunt of a system where there's no federal mandate. There's no federal obligation to speak of. It's not about how do we create the best education for our children. That's not what is happening in this country today. It's whatever happens locally with some federal assistance if you're lucky. I believe in a system that says the education of our children is a national priority. There needs to be an actual, real federal commitment to funding it from day one for every school district equally in the nation. My kids went to public school. I went to public school. This is personal for me. We're doing it the wrong way. We're doing it backwards in America. It doesn't have to be that way. And we're starting too late. So here's the second thing I say. Early child education. We know the greatest opportunity to reach our kids is between birth and 5 years old. But in many parts of this country, full-day education doesn't start until a child's 6. We're doing it backwards. We need not only full-day kindergarten, we need full-day pre-K, and I've done that in the biggest school system in the country, full-day pre-K for every child for free right now in New York. But why stop there, America? We should do the same for 3-year-olds. And I'm not just talking the talk, I'm walking the walk. In New York City today, we have started 3K, full-day, high-quality early child education for 3-year-olds. 20,000 kids this September will be getting 3K in New York City, and it will be a universal right soon. I want a national plan for 3K, for 4K, and for kindergarten, every school in America, and that will create enough jobs for 500,000 educators, and we need them to move this country forward. Lastly, I'm going to propose something that may sound really big, but it's what we deserve in this country. We should enshrine the notion that a quality education is an American right, that every child must have the right to a quality education. I believe we need a constitutional amendment to make clear that it is the law of this land, it is part of who we are as Americans, a traditional public education, a quality public education for every child in America.
Thank you, Izamer. Okay. Our next member is Tricia. She's a teacher librarian from Illinois. And she wants to know, what's your comprehensive plan for funding public schools so that students receive the supports they need to thrive?
Amen. Amen. First, using the word thrive reminds me to make mention to the love of my life, our First Lady Shirlane McCray in New York, who has created the Thrive Initiative, access to mental health for all. And we announced a huge initiative for social emotional learning in all our schools, more social workers, more guidance counselors. That's what we're doing in New York, and that's what we need to do all over this country. I believe in investing in education. And look, there's going to be a lot of great candidates before you today, good people, good ideas. The question is not just who wants to do it, but who has done it. The things I'm talking about I've done in New York, in a tough place. We invested constantly. By the way, we not only invested in our children, we invested in our educators. Every year that I've been mayor, we've given a raise to the educators of New York, and we should do the same for the educators of the United States of America. And these investments pay off. And this is what we have to do. You know, the 2020 election is a chance to change the entire discussion in America. It is a chance to say to this country, we've gotten it wrong in education, but we could get it right. But it has to be a federal responsibility. It's a chance to say to our own party, decide who we are as Democrats. We should be on the side of educators, not on the side of charter schools, not on the side of big corporations, not on the side of the elite. We should be the party of working people, and educators are working people. So my vision is straightforward. a federal government that finally takes responsibility for education. This is the year where we can have that discussion the right way in this country. And I am telling you based on experience, when I ran for mayor, I said pre-K for every child for free was my #1 priority. It was not the issue that anyone thought was on the tip of the tongue of every voter. It was not the issue they thought was the most popular. But I said to people, this is going to change the lives of our kids. This is going to help families to get to work. This is going to lift an economic burden. This is going to allow every child to start at the same starting line. Isn't that what we believe in? Every child reaching their God-given potential? It wasn't a big issue at the beginning, but if you talk about it enough, if you show it can be done, if you inspire people enough, it becomes an issue on everyone's mind. And what should be on everyone's mind is a nation that invests in public education the right way. It can be done. As I said, there's plenty of money. It's just in the wrong hands. It should be in the hands of our teachers, our parents, our students, where we can frame the future of this country and make this country greater than ever before. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you for having me. The You Beto was priceless.
We are ready for our next candidate.
Please welcome Tim Ryan.
So much.
Welcome to the NEA.
Thank you for having me.
This is so we'll go over a few ground rules. They've heard it like 17 times now, so they could probably lip sync it. We'll do a Lily Vanilli. 1 minute to give an opening statement.
Yes.
They can see this little cute clock here. They can see it up on the screen, so that all you have to do, if you go over, we're very sweet, and we're going to just start clapping for you. We're so nice.
Excellent.
And then we have 3 questions we'd like to give you 3 minutes to answer. So welcome. You can sit, you can stand, you can just be comfortable.
Thank you.
1 minute.
Hi, NEA. Hello, educators. Everyone's telling us how good things are. And I just wonder why we all feel so bad. Why we wake up in the morning and got a knot in our stomach, we turn on TV, we see what's happening every day. And the reality of it is, for 40 years, the systems in the United States have been broken. Our economic system has been broken. The education system has been broken. The healthcare system's been broken. The food system's been broken. The environmental system's been broken. The criminal justice system's been broken. And all of these issues make their way into your school. And so today's discussion is about not how we reform education, but how we transform education.
Congressman, we have a website where people can upload video questions or type them in. We have a video question for you from Sandy in Pennsylvania.
If you get elected, how would you help school districts with funding at the federal level? We have many students who have socioeconomic barriers to their learning and have food insecurity. So I would like to know your plan to help us.
Thank you. Obviously, a great question. I released a plan this week that puts $50 billion back into Title I and other programs to help local communities fund their schools and the school programmings that they need. I support and have co-sponsored and will push for $100 billion in infrastructure projects in schools all across the United States of America. As you know better than anybody, we have a $23 billion gap between the wealthiest school districts in the country and school districts that have high populations of poverty, schools of color. And I think it's imperative that we close that gap and make these investments. I think we help these schools rebuild. I think we help with infrastructure projects like broadband. I think we help with playgrounds. I think we help with school-based health clinics. I think we make sure that every school has a maker space so we can move ourselves into the 21st century. These are the issues that are critically important. I also have in our plan, in my plan, a loan forgiveness program for teachers and also an expanded tax credit for teachers who dig into their own pocket and pay a lot of money to keep the classroom going. And I know this because my wife is a first grade school teacher. I will say also, we need an economic plan in the United States of America that rebuilds the middle class in the United States of America. For too often, we have not held the very people accountable who have run away with all the gold. It's like the old country song, you know? You get the gold mine, we get the shaft. It's time for us to hold this broken economic system accountable. They've convinced people in the United States that if we cut taxes for the top 1%, that somehow that's going to build a school. Somehow that's going to be able to have us hire new teachers. Somehow that's going to pave a road or build a hospital or provide health care. We're not just talking about education in this conference today. We're talking about reshifting the priorities of the United States of America from the top 1% to the working class people of this country. And when I say, thank you, and when I say working class, I mean white, black, brown, gay, straight, north, south, urban, rural, all of us. They've tried to divide us. They've tried to divide us for 30 years. Who's black, who's white, who's brown, who's gay, who's straight, who's a Democrat, who's in a union, who's not in a union. It's time for us to unify this country.
Congressman, Vicki is an educator from the great state of Hawaii. And she wrote in on the website and wants to know your plan to address gun violence and stop the proliferation of school shootings?
That's a great question. This is obviously very personal, as my wife is a school teacher, as I mentioned, and right down the hall, our 5-year-old Brady goes to preschool. And like all of you who also have kids in schools, and you're obviously in schools, all of the educators here, this is an issue that we see too often, and it's unique to the United States. And so I support the universal background check. I support making sure we get weapons of war off the streets of the United States of America. I support what we call closing the Charleston loophole. I support studying gun violence as a public health issue in the United States of America, like it is. But I also believe that we have to play offense. And in my plan, we have a program of wraparound services to make sure that we have a mental health counselor in every school in the United States of America. That we can have a nurse in every school. But here's what I think is most important. 90% of the kids who come to a school and use a gun and kill students and other educators, 90% of those kids come from that school. And 73% of those kids have felt shamed or bullied or isolated in some way. And I believe it's imperative for us to have social and emotional learning in every school so that we can make sure that all of these kids, are connected to each other, to the teacher, to the school, which is why when Sandy Hook had their terrible tragedy, they went off and they did an analysis of how can we prevent this from happening again in the United States. And Scarlett Lewis, a dear friend of mine, who was one of the parents who lost a kid, they put this analysis together and they came back with 3 recommendations. One's mental health coverage, 2 is gun control, and 3 is social and emotional learning in the schools. So help me God, if we're going to transform our schools, we have to start recognizing that before we do anything, before we start talking about tests, we got to start talking about how we take care of our kids in our schools. How do we address their trauma? It's so tempting to blow through that.
It really is.
I had great teachers, so I follow the rules.
Well, great teachers had a lot of kids that didn't follow the rules, but you are wise. You are wise. We have one more question for you, and this one comes from Barbara. She's a retired educator from the great state of Oregon. And her question is, what would you do as president to ensure retired educators' pensions and benefits would be protected for their future?
First thing I would do is repeal the windfall elimination provision. Government offset provision. I probably should just sit down now because I don't know if it gets any better than the windfall elimination, right? But I will say that that is an essential issue that I've been dealing with for a long time representing Ohio. It's critical to making sure. Thank you, Ohio. We're an obnoxious bunch, but we really don't care, do we? See what I'm saying? But we also have to reform and fix Social Security after we do that. And I have a plan that gets us to Social Security till 2100. I want to make sure that we give 12 or 13 million citizens in this country who get Social Security a pay raise. I want to make sure that this system is solvent for our kids and our grandkids. But the best way to help, and I talked about the economy and growth and getting jobs to help support the local tax base so that we can get increased wages to teachers so you can all negotiate good contracts that can put more money into your retirements. And to me, that means we've got to double the size of the unions in the United States of America so that we can push this agenda. So I just want to end with a quick story about Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, there's a great story of someone catching Muhammad Ali in Kentucky when he retired. And he went up to Muhammad Ali and he said, "Hey, champ, I saw you fight." And you know, champ had a little high-pitched voice. He said, "Yeah, great, great." And the guy said, "Yeah, I saw you got knocked down in the 3rd round." And champ said, "Wasn't my fight." And the guy said, "No, I remember my dad took me to the fight and we saw you. It was a great fight, but you got knocked down in the 3rd round." And Ali said, "Wasn't my fight. I ain't never been knocked down." Champ said, "I'm either up or I'm getting up." And I'm telling you that the American Union movement is never knocked down. We are either up or we're getting up. Teachers are never knocked down. They're either up or they're getting up. Our kids are never knocked down. Public education is never knocked down. It's either up or getting up. Let's win this election. Thank you so much. Thank you. Honor to meet you. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
You don't know what I'm hearing in this nice little earpiece here, all right? But they're going, our last candidate is stuck in traffic. Our last Lily, ad lib, do something. Sit down, relax, relax, relax. I won't be singing a song. I know you're disappointed. And then all of a sudden, it is our next candidate is in the building. We are ready for our final candidate.
Please welcome Kamala Harris.
Tickets or anything like that.
I won't tell.
But here are the rules, and you know we're teachers. We love rules, and so educators, and we know how. This is our version of pencils down. So it will go like this. See that tiny little thing there? Everybody can see it on the big screen.
That clock is screaming.
It is. You guys have no idea how big this is.
It's gigantic.
1 minute to make any kind of. I'm going to let you breathe for a minute while I go this. Okay. 1 minute to make any opening statement. And hi, Senator. And then we have 3 questions that I'll ask you that our members submitted. And you get 3 minutes. And when the clock winds down, if you keep going, we're going to love you so much that we're just going to start clapping. We're just going to start clapping. And so we would start, and you can sit, you can stand, you can be comfortable. 1 minute for your opening statement.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. I want to just thank you for what you do every day. Our educators, you are raising our children. There are 2 groups of people raising our children. Parents, often with the assistance of grandparents and aunties and uncles, and you. And I thank you. You are not paid your value, which is why I am proposing what will be the first in the nation's history federal investment in closing the teacher pay gap, but thinking of teachers also as our educators. It's our bus drivers, it's our cafeteria workers, it's our custodians. And what we will do is close that gap. On average is $13,500 a year, and we will close it by the federal investment in closing that gap. It'll be a matching fund with states, because here's my belief, and it's a strong belief. I believe you can judge a society based on how it treats its children. And I believe there is no greater expression of love that a society can extend toward its children than to invest in their education and, by extension, their educators. Thank you.
On our fabulous website, strongpublicschools.org, which I'm sure you're going to go look up as soon as you're off the stage, we've invited all of our 3 million members, and really anyone in the public, to upload a question, upload a video, or write a question. Good. What we have for you is our first question.
Okay, great.
And it is, they moved it so fast I didn't get to see who it's from. Okay, from Carlos. Carlos in Colorado. It has, and you can see his video over here, right? Yeah, she's looking for Carlos in Colorado.
Your Georgia, California's over there.
As president, will you promise to fully fund the Individuals with Disabilities Act and ensure that all students, especially students with high needs, ensure that they have the opportunities to succeed in our schools?
Pretty much this one right here.
That's right. Well, yeah, the IDEA Act. So I'm actually a co-sponsor of the IDEA Act in the United States Senate. And when elected president, hopefully with your great help, I will sign it as one of my first acts of business. Let's look at how this plays out. As you guys know, there's a mandate that the federal government pay 40% of the special ed needs and the special needs of our children, and they're not doing it. They're doing about 15%. It's falling. It's actually immoral as far as I'm concerned. Because also the way that this really plays out in real lives is that the states have to then try and make up the difference, which they cannot, which means that every day in America we have children whose IEP needs are not being met, children who are placed in general education classrooms, children who are falling through the cracks, and through no fault of their own, but because the system has failed them and because the federal government has not funded the states to meet the needs of those children. It is immoral, it is wrong, and I will address it as one of the first orders of business, because all of our children have a capacity to soar, but we have got to give them the tools that we know they need. And that's what is most immoral about the situation. We know that we have children with these needs. We know that. And we have a system in place for assessing that. Flawed though it may be, it's there. But once assessed, we still are not meeting their needs. It is wrong. We are failing our children.
Writing in on our website is Susan, a retired teacher from Minnesota. Okay. And she asks, what questions will you ask when picking your Department of Education secretary?
Well, I will tell you, I will not be interested in grizzly bears. And I come from the Golden State. But my shameless plugs to my Californians. But I will say this in all seriousness. That is one of probably the most important positions in the president's cabinet. It is a position that is charged with a duty to concern itself with the future of our nation, to concern itself with the future of our children, to concern itself with whether we are nurturing our children, whether we are supporting them, whether we are challenging them, whether we are lifting them up. And that's not what we currently have. We all know that. Under a Harris administration, I promise you that the person who is nominated will be someone who comes from public schools. I also promise you that you will be at the table to help me make that decision. And many of you know this issue of education and who our teachers are, who our educators are, is personal to me on so many levels. Many of you know the story. My first grade teacher at Thousand Oaks Elementary School in Berkeley, California, her name was Mrs. Frances Wilson. God rest her soul. She, my first grade teacher, Mrs. Wilson, attended my law school graduation. I would not be standing here if during the course of my life there were not those teachers who invested in me, who convinced me I was special. I wasn't particularly special, but they told me I was, and I believed them, which is what you do for your students, which puts us on a path to believing we can do anything. And so we have got to have, as the Secretary of Education, someone who knows the power and the relevance and the importance of our public education system and our public teachers. And I promise you, putting somebody in that position will be one of the most important acts that I can ever commit as President of the United States, and I take it seriously, and I look forward to working with you to do it the right way.
Senator, this is your final question. Let's make it multiple choice. Okay. Our last question comes from one of our higher education members. Okay. Sally is a psychology professor. She wants to know, what will you do to ensure students are treated fairly by loan companies and future students won't have to carry the burden of crushing student debt?
So I'll tell you, in terms of my background, when I was Attorney General of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice, I sued one of the biggest for-profit colleges. It's called Corinthian, and I took them out of business. And the reason is They were predatory in their practices, as with so many who play in this field who are for profit in the way that they so-called do education. Their business model has clearly been to put profit over the education of their students. And so what I saw with that for-profit college is they were engaged in predatory practices. They were promising these students that with large amounts of payment and tuition and fees, that they would get an education that would allow them to give them a job and a life that would be productive and would be a living wage, and that's not what happened. So I can tell you, one, my priority is to go after the predatory folks who are in this space, who are servicing these loans, who are giving these loans out. It is also, I am a proponent of debt-free college. I believe we also need to have loan forgiveness for middle class and working students. I also believe that we have got to take seriously the ability of our students to refinance their student loan debt. But we've got to get to the point of the question. We've got to get the predators out of this space. And I've got 1 minute and 30 seconds left, so I want to talk about another issue. And the other issue is, I will tell you guys that there are so many issues, whatever it is, from climate crisis to national security, that I always think of through the lens of a child. And one of the other issues that directly impacts you is gun violence, and what this nation and its leaders are not doing, which is to not have the courage to pass smart gun safety laws in our country, so that you have to perform drills with our students and teach them about how they should hide in a closet in the event that there is a mass shooter roaming the hallways of your schools. And then those children are distracted in terms of their ability to learn because people in the United States Congress have failed to have the courage. So I will tell you, on day one, I will give, when elected, the United States Congress 100 days to pull their act together on this and put a bill on my desk for signature. And if they do not, I will take executive action and put in place what will be the first comprehensive universal background check requirement. I will require that we take the licenses from gun dealers, and I will ban the importation of assault weapons into our country. Done.
Amazed, and I still want to settle. I want to, I'm going to say it for like the next year and a half. strongpublicschools.org. That's when someone says, "What's NEA doing about the next election?" You say, "I am a delegate to my union." I was one of almost 10,000 people that got to personally hear what these candidates had to say about education and children and our professions. And you send them to strongpublicschools.org, say, "Ask your question." Let me tell you another thing you're going to find there. You will find something that has all of the events of all of the candidates. By the way, we are not here at this early part of the campaign promoting a candidate. We are promoting our agenda, what we want for children, for students, for our professions, for our communities, for our families, for social justice. And so we want you to show up at every single event you can get to. They're all over the country. Go up and go events. What's around where I'm going? And then you get a car full of people and you go to every event wearing a Red for Ed shirt or something that identifies you as a delegate, as a leader of this association, of this union, that will be called upon to make the decision of which candidate we will ultimately, at the right time, decide to support. We have so much to do and so little time, but we are going to do it, and we are going to do it together. Thank you all for your patience in making this event happen. We are going to take a quick break to get people back up on stage so we can finish our business, and I think some of these cameras are going to disappear. So take a little stretch break. Don't go far. We will be back in about 5 minutes, so we'll see you in 10 minutes.